My camera is moving, and someone have been digging up Karin's crypt. What would the ghost of Goring do if he saw this?
Braunen Kolonnen der SA, die schwarzen der SS und der SS, der Führer ruft, gleich sind sie da, von Nord, von Süd, von Ost und West.
I am now in the woods of Schorfheide, about 1 hour drive north of Berlin. Goring is very well documented, so I will not tell all of his story here. But I will begin with some background story of CARINHALL. But first, I will bend my head. It's well known that Goring was a fighter pilot in World War I and a decorated ace. But not everyone knows about his time in Sweden. After the war, Germany was not allowed to have an air force. So Goring took his Fokker and escaped first to Denmark and then to Sweden to fly mail and passengers. In Rosens Castle lived a count by the name of Erik von Rosen with his family. On a stormy winter day in February 1920, he had to fly from Stockholm to his castle. Goring was the only pilot who dared to fly him that day. And here is von Rosen speaking about it.
Det var en våldsam snöstorm. Vi landade slutligen på bågens is. Det var ganska nära Tretopparna. Vi dalade ner och sen gick vi då in stora hallen på Rockelsö. Slog oss ner framför en flammande brasa med spisen.
And in this room they say Karin came down the stairs and met Goring for the first time. Erik von Rosen was an explorer and an ethnographer. He traveled to study cultures in Lapland, in Argentina, Bolivia, Africa and other places. And he supplied museums in Sweden with lots of his findings. Von Rosen also liked to hunt, and in 1904 he killed all these Russian bears that he took to Sweden. And he also killed 2 of them with a spear. And by a mistake, he also killed a mother, so he had to take care of a baby bear that he had at the castle as a pet bear. Von Rosen's political views was very far right, very conservative, very ultra-nationalistic, and very anti-Semitic, just like his wife and probably the whole family. In the Finnish Civil War in 1918, between the right-wing Whites and the socialistic Reds, von Rosen contributed to the Whites by sending them their first airplane. Von Rosen painted the plane with a blue swastika on white field. But this swastika had no political connotation. It was just an old Viking symbol that meant good luck. The Finnish Air Force would keep von Rosen's swastika logo until 2020. The two smallest children in this film footage is Carl, Gustav and Birgitta. The day after Goring landed at the castle, he took them for their first ride with a plane.
His stage, the sky. He's held his pilot's license for 40 years. His first job, a stunt flyer in an aerial service. He joined in the Ethiopian War, flying an ambulance. His uncle was the Nazi overlord Hermann Goring, but his first wife was thrown into Dachau concentration camp and killed herself.
Well, there is a political interest to hide the truth, naturally. The same as Hitler was hiding his gas chambers.
In 1977, in the war between Ethiopia and Somalia, he was killed in a surprise Somali guerrilla attack. Mary and Eric von Rosen's children were probably indoctrinated with their parents' values. And so was Birgitta, who married a German industrialist in 1933. On her wedding, she got roses from Hitler. And also they played the Host Vessel song. I would guess all the wedding guests in these pictures were pro-Nazi. Birgitta would divorce this man, and in 1948 she would marry a German artist. Birgitta would completely turn against the Nazis and became a writer and an activist for human rights, just like her brother, Carl Gustav. Eric von Rosen built a hunting lodge decorated with swastikas, which Goring liked very much. And that style of lodge would inspire Goring to build a Swedish-style lodge in Germany, at CARINHALL. When Goring met Karin, she was married to Nils von Kantzow. He was an officer and a gymnastic, and he won a gold medal with the Swedish gymnastic team in London 1908. Karin married Nils in 1910, and in 1912 they had a child, Thomas. When Goring met Karin that day in 1920, they fell in love, and Karin would soon divorce Nils and move to Germany with Goring. In 1923 they married, and the same year Goring became leader of the SA, the stormtroopers. Goring was badly shot in the thigh. He was carried into this house that was owned by a Jew whose wife treated his wound. After the failed putsch, Karin and Goring had to escape Germany because they were wanted. And they went first to Austria and then Italy. They came back to Sweden in 1925 and lived mostly in Stockholm. In Sweden, Goring joined the Swedish Nazi Party, and he became friends with the leader, Furugård. Goring was a morphine addict by this time, and between 1925 and 27, he had very bad mental breakdowns. He was in and out from mental hospitals, and they also had to use straitjackets on him because he was so violent. In 1925, Karin had become a favorite to Hitler, Now she was the first lady of Nazi Germany and became very popular. In April of 25, Hitler sent her this postcard. In 1927, the wanted Putsch refugees got amnesty, and then Karin and Goring could return to Germany, where Goring got more involved with the Nazi party as a leader. There was so much reactions and so much naivety and manipulations that changed Germany. Not only among the people, but also among politicians like von Papen, who thought they could control Hitler and the Nazis. In 1933, he seemed to be a very busy man, but still, he had time to go to Sweden and visit all of von Rosens and also Karin's son, Thomas, whom he had a very good relation with. Thomas would also visit Göring at CARINHALL and in Obersalzberg. When the Russians invaded Finland, Thomas joined the German army, who then were fighting together with Finland. Thomas died in a hospital in Stockholm, but not, as many have said, by suicide. An English author who interviewed him shortly before his death said, "He was one of the saddest men I ever met." Later, this hunting lodge would be far too small for Goring. Here is Goring shooting with a bow, probably inspired by Erich von Rosen, who also liked to shoot with a bow. In 1934, Karin's burial site in Sweden had been sabotaged, so Goring decided to move her remains to a mausoleum he built in the woods close to his lodge. In Sweden, Karin was buried in a zinc coffin, and then they put that one inside a tin coffin that became a very heavy thing to carry. And here you see von Rosens doing the Hitler salute, as they always did with the Nazis. In 1951 they found human bones in the forest of Carinhall. They presumed it was Karin. So she was buried for the third time at Leuven in Sweden. The crypt down there seemed to have been big enough for the tin coffin and the sofa for Goring. They say he went down there every day when he was at Carinhall, and sometimes he also brought some guests.
Bis hierher ging es. Das wurde dann alles gleich gemacht, zugeschüttet.
In 1991, treasure hunters were filming this video when they found a zinc coffin with skeletal remains. It was first in 2012 it was proven by DNA samples from her son Thomas that the remains was Karin. Digging here is not legal, but they did it anyway. And this time it was a good thing for the family of Karin. In 1938, Karin's oldest sister Fanny, who was an even stronger Nazi supporter than Karin, wrote a biography of Karin. And that book became a bestseller in Germany. Only Mein Kampf sold better. But that also includes those who were forced to buy it. She was then buried again at Louver Island for the fourth time. Who that person was that was buried in 1951, nobody knows. They say the ghost of Goring is often seen walking out from the graveyard. Well, some neo-Nazis used to go there anyway and do some heiling. Okay, I'm back at the parking spot. I will show you how to find Karin's mausoleum. If you see the map here, you have to go back down to the right from the parking. I will continue at Carinhall and be about here. I will turn the map so you see the locations of the buildings a little bit better. I'm here, and now I continue with bending my head. It's impossible to know exactly where the buildings were. Now you just see a forest with remnants spread everywhere. I might be here now, but I would like to have a real expert to show me exactly where I am. Now I've come to a hole down to a bunker. And the sign here says, protected endangered bats. Keep the hole open. I think it was a hole like this where the treasure hunter Klaus Funke started to dig up in the 90s. He was exploring the bunker for 1.5 years and found pieces of Göring's collections of art and antiques, but it was all smashed up. Some of the antiques were probably stolen from Paris, like this urn from 500 BC. And this piece here, you can see in this room. I'll give you the links where you can read more about those findings. And here is another hole down to a bunker or a basement where some people goes into to explore. I give you also the link to this video. I'm now close to where the original hunting lodge stood. He liked to have pet lions that he used to borrow from Berlin Zoo, I think. About 1935, Goring started to extend his hunting lodge, as you see here. And in 1935, Goring remarried, and members of the von Rosen family was present at the marriage, and also Thomas, Karin's son.
The Lutheran Cathedral in Berlin is the scene of a wedding which is immensely popular in Germany. The bride enters alone. She is followed by Germany's best man, Hitler.
Standing on the steps, Goring and his wife, who is the leading actress of the Prussian State Theatre, give the Nazi salute while the national anthem is played. 100,000 good Germans attest the popularity of the great Prime Minister of Prussia and his proud wife.
And you can spot them here in the film and the picture. And then you can see the Swedish entourage close to the Görings. And the man serving is the head waiter of this luxurious restaurant in Berlin. And he's a Swede by the name of Carl Falkman. He would later have a well-known son in Sweden, the opera singer and actor Loa Falkman. I don't think Carl was a Nazi, but he wrote this funny book about serving Goring. And here is a whole bunch of Swedish people visiting Carinhall. And the man behind the camera is Thomas von Kantzow. He would later give an emotional witness to favor Goring at the Nuremberg trial. A royal couple would visit Carinhall as well. That was Prince Gustav Adolf and his wife, Princess Sibylle, or as we say in Sweden, Prinsessan Sibylla. Prince Gustav Adolf was the father of the present king in Sweden. Sibylle was German, and they married in Coburg, Germany. Sibylle's father was very much a Nazi. And the SA, the Nazi brown shirts, were there too, to control and guard the whole event.
I'm so glad to come to Sweden.
I'm glad to see you all today through the film.
The prince died in a plane crash in 1947, and Sibylle died in 1972. They were not Nazis, but very friendly to Hitler and Goring at the time. And here is Charles Lindbergh and his wife in 1936. Lindbergh was very famous at that time, but his legacy as a heroic pilot became overshadowed when he supported Nazi Germany at that time. His grandfather was a Swedish farmer from Smedstorp in Skåne of southern Sweden. Eric and Mary von Rosen would visit Carinhall many times. And here they are again. And in 1937, when Goring arranged a party for Benito Mussolini, they were there. And so were their daughter, Birgitta. By then, Goring had made a big extension of his hunting lodge. It became a luxurious mansion. Here is Mussolini with Count Ciano, who was married to Mussolini's daughter. And Count Ciano would later be executed by his father-in-law. And here you can see some well-known Nazis, some SS people as well. And you see here von Rosen sneaking behind with a camera. At this time, Mussolini had invaded Abyssinia, what is now Ethiopia. I wonder what von Rosen family thought about his son Carl Gustav. He had been aiding and saving civilians in Ethiopia with his Red Cross plane. Mussolini's fascists had not only killed civilians with bombs, but also used mustard gas. They had also been targeting Red Cross workers, and Carl Gustav had to save them as well. I would guess Carl Gustav wasn't too fond of Mussolini. I wonder what these two people see in the future. I would think they had no clue at all about their destiny. Goring liked to play with the toy trains, and he had 3 model railway sceneries at CARINHALL. He had one in the attic and one in the basement and one on a table in a room. And he used to entertain the guests with these railway sceneries. I think he played war as well. I wonder if he played with model cattle wagons. And Goring had to have another building and more space. Goring would now have more space for his art collection, which he stole from museums in invaded countries and from people who were sent with trains to extermination camps. And as a vain man with an egocentric ego, he would show off his collection just as he showed off with everything else. And then came the conversations about war and peace. And hunting. Here you see Erik von Rosen sharing his hunting experience with Lord Halifax in Berlin.
As to my feelings and impressions of all that I have seen, it's a wonderful tribute to those who have organized it.
The guest sticks to his bowler. The host wears the sort of hat that would create a diversion in Piccadilly. Britain's envoy has proved himself such an expert on the subject of hunting that the Germans have dubbed him Sir Tally-Ho-Fax. And of course General Goring is his country's master of the hunt, so the two have something in common. But somehow we suspect that what they're hunting for is a political formula. Why don't they ask the bison? Maybe they could tell them something about living in peace.
In 1939, this Swedish businessman, Birger Dahlérus, made several trips between Berlin and London. Since the failure of the Munich Agreement in 1938, he, Dahlérus, together with people like Lord Halifax, saw themselves as the only players who could stop Hitler from invading Poland. In Munich, Hitler wasn't too pleased with Göring's proposal for peace, And in 1939, Goring was still not on the same page, according to Dallerus. At the trial in Nuremberg, in 1946, Dallerus witnessed about the conversation he had with Halifax, Goring and Hitler.
Attention! Tribunal!
Will you tell me your name? Superior Dallerus.
Well, I personally had the impression that Goring was the member of the German government who was most likely to work for peace.
Welchen Vorschlag machten Sie dann dem Lord Halifax?
I suggested to Lord Halifax if he could write a letter to Goring, I should at once proceed to Berlin and hand it over.
Ist Ihrem Vorschlag entsprochen?
Yes, Lord Halifax consulted Chamberlain and afterwards wrote an excellent letter.
Haben Sie dann noch mit Hitler eine Unterredung gehabt an diesem Tage?
Well, Hitler started in his usual way a long explanation of German policy. He then got rather excited, walked up and down, and he seemed to be speaking as if he didn't realize that somebody was present. After a while, he shouted that he would build airplanes, 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 airplanes he would build. And he would win a war. I think I should mention that I met Hitler in the Reichskanzlei on the 1st of September, immediately after his speech before the Reichstag in the Krolloper. And he told me that he was going to smash up Poland and take the whole country. Goering interrupted, indicating that he would advance to certain points. But Hitler was in an uncontrollable frame of mind and started to shout he would fight 1 year, 2 years, and he started up in a great excitement, saying that he would fight 10 years.
You must plead guilty or not guilty. Bekenne mich im Sinne der Anklage nicht schuldig.
Now, for the first time, international gangsters stand trial as common criminals. Goring still trying to read his statement and still getting nowhere.
You are not entitled to address the tribunal except through your counsel at the present time.
The first individual verdict dealt with Goring. Lord Justice Lawrence speaking.
Goring claims its purposes have been misunderstood, but admits that as a matter of course and a matter of duty, we would have used Russia for our purposes, conquered.
Hermann Wilhelm Goering, on the counts of the indictment on which you have been convicted, the tribunal sentences you to death by hanging.
So he died, refused to be hanged, and used a cyanide capsule. Some people say that Erich von Rosen was still defending Goring after the war. The others say he turned against him. But whatever, the truth is, von Rosen was a Nazi. And those people in Sweden who decided to honor von Rosen with a stamp in 1994, well, I guess they tried to sweep his legacy as a Nazi under the carpet. Göring's plans for even a grander palace at CARINHALL with an art museum would crash, just like the Nazis crashed. In 1990, the East Germans would do some more findings at CARINHALL. And 30 years later, in 2020, this marble pillar was discovered. And maybe there's more down there. And here in the end of this video, I will show you the entrance to CARINHALL, which is still there with Göring's coat of arms, with his two batons.